So, hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Afin Sefi, and I'm going to be moderating today's talk. So, again, I would like to welcome all the students and the mentors to today's session. As you all might know, that today's session is going to revolve around HR career and leadership. As like me, I'm pretty sure there are many other who aspire to build their careers in HR. So this is going to be a great opportunity we have, and make sure you like squeeze every little drop of knowledge out of it. So today's mentor of today's session is Dr. Nazneen Razi. Honestly, I don't know where to start from, as Dr. Razi has worn many hats over their journey, from Osmania University studying English literature to MBA from Benedictine University. Where also she went for the PhD. This journey of her and all the lesson entitled to her journey are going to be learned by us in today's session, today's night. So Dr. Nazneen has worked in and as so many positions. Some of them are she has worked as vice president at CNA Insurance Company, VP Human Resource at CNA Risk Management, Chief Administrator Officer as Cosmic 2, and also presently she has been working with HRNR Talent Consulting as president and principal. Honestly, I'm pretty sure I've left out some of the positions held by her, but let us go ahead with today's talk in the session and hear Dr. Nazneen talk. Uh, Very much welcome, ma'am, and thank you so much for giving your precious time to us. I'm very glad that I have the opportunity to introduce on your welcome you for today's session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Afreen. That was a lovely introduction. You just earned a few extra leadership points for volunteering. I guess you were volunteered or volunteering to do the introduction. So thank you for that. Good evening, everyone in India, and good morning to my colleagues in the US. I'm really thrilled at this opportunity to speak to you this evening. Can everyone hear me clearly? I'm going to share my screen. Okay, good. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. So if you want to put yourselves on mute, and then we can get started here. As you can see, I decided today to do sort of a double presentation. You know, my career in HR has been long and spanned over 3 decades. And of course, leadership, it has been something that I've been studying and researching. So I thought I would talk a little bit about both of these topics. And so I chose these topics because I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what opportunities exist outside of the traditional MBA field. You know, you can think about marketing or finance, but HR has become a very different kind of a profession in this day and age. And I want to show you how this profession has evolved over the years. And then if time permits, we'll talk a little bit about leadership towards the end. So how did I enter this field? You heard Afreen say that my background, I grew up in Hyderabad and I went to Osmania University, and I actually got an MBA, a master's in literature, and I was doing doctoral studies in literature. And I taught at New Science College. You're probably familiar with New Science College in Ameerpet. I was a lecturer for a year, and then I came to the US. And the reason I ended up in HR was just happenstance. You know, I applied for jobs when we were in Seattle, Washington, and I ended up getting a job as a personnel assistant. In those days, it used to be called personnel administration. And it was for a small insurance company. And I did everything from hiring to firing to managing performance, to training and development. So it was a very much of a generalist role. And when I started working there, I got pretty interested to the point where I thought that I definitely need to anchor my career into something that I enjoy. So then I started down the path of getting educated, reading about it, getting much more proficient in this particular field. So that's when I'm so glad as I look back, it was really fortuitous for me to have started in that small job and then growing from beyond. I'll show you the evolution of HR. What it is today is nothing like it was 20, 30 years ago. And it has come a long way. It has such a strong impact in this world, not just in the US, but across the globe. So that was my little bit about my journey. So let's talk about today. What I'm going to do is let's talk about why should you consider HR? If you're not considering it, it is possibly an area that you might want to explore. What are some of the skills that complement the profession that you might need? How have the roles evolved over time? And what does the future of HR look like? And of course, finally, what is the pay structure for HR? What can you expect from this profession? So with that, let me be frank with you. Not everyone is suited to do an HR job, okay? It is a very exciting field. And for those of you who are interested, it is a promising profession. But what I want to do is to give you a flavor of why one should choose or not choose this profession. I'm going to talk about, as I said, the skills. And let's dive into some of the things that have happened in the business world across the globe. Let me start by saying that the profession has held the highest esteem in the minds of CEOs. So I go back, you probably, you guys are too young to know GE, the Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE. I mean, he was an iconic leader. GE was as big as any organization is today, like Microsoft or Amazon or Apple. GE was sort of the behemoth in those times. And Jack Welch was the iconic leader of leaders. And so he believed in his book, he's written several books, and the one book called Winning, he says that the top two jobs in his organization were the chief HR officer and the chief financial officer. And you can see his comment, he died last year. And right about the time just before his passing, he made this comment. He was teaching at MIT in a Sloan School of Management. He also was the founder of the Jack Welch Management Institute. And there are 35 CEOs of top Fortune companies that will tell you that he was their mentor. So he's sort of the personification of leadership. And he really believed in HR, and he said HR is driving force behind what makes a winning team. And he predicts that the future of HR will be very powerful in the business world. There are several other stories of CEOs. Let me take one that is more contemporary. Sundar Pichai. And I think we all know Sundar Pichai is the CEO of Microsoft. And I do know his head of HR, Kathleen Hogan. And Microsoft would not have been successful was it not for that partnership that Kathleen and Sundar have. Microsoft has had a huge ride. They bought LinkedIn. If you remember 5 years ago, they bought LinkedIn, and they've had a lot of issues with harassment. They've been in the media in a good way and a not good way. And when things are going well, you need HR. When things are not going well, you need HR. So the CEOs and leadership always rely on HR to help them through the thick and the thin. And Sundar will tell you, his main claim to fame is his people, and he believed in having a growth mindset. I talk about this where he gave every single employee a book called The Growth Mindset because he believed in his people, and HR was a huge influencer. And then there are CEOs who used to be heads of HR who are now CEOs. I'll give you an example. Mary Barra, who's the CEO of GM. She was head of HR before she moved to becoming the CEO of General Motors. Okay, huge job. Here's another one, Nigel Travis, who is the CEO of Dunkin' Brands. I think Dunkin' Donuts has been in India and hasn't done quite as well in India as it did in the US, or it does in the US. But Nigel tells you, and he was the head of HR. And when he ran HR, he did not know one end of the balance sheet from another. But what he says, what moved him to the top of the chain is his people skills. The lesson he says here is don't be afraid to say what you don't know, and don't be frightened to be ignorant about something. These are true statements. Again, I encourage you to listen to that and say, don't be afraid. I know sometimes it's not that easy to move out of your comfort zone, but that's what's going to get you ahead. So let's talk about HR. Why should HR be right for you? Why is HR right for you? Is it right for you? Let's talk about that. So first of all, here are things that are very positive. As I've gone through my career, you can see that there's certain things that really work well for people, certain people. HR gives you a chance to help people, particularly in the pandemic world, today especially. There's a lot going on in the corporate environment, and HR is there at the epicenter of some of the changes that are taking place. When people are working remotely, when they have family issues, and it's very different in today's world than it used to be. And this is a chance to help people. It's a great opportunity for growth for yourself. You can grow tremendously in this profession because there's a lot of variability, a lot of diverse experiences you can get. The days are filled with variety of tasks. You can never get bored. You go from one job, one task to another. It's always constantly moving. This is an opportunity to use your soft skills. I know when you're in the computer science field, you're using your hard skills like data science, you're using, robotics. But here, you're using a different part of your brain, your soft skills, your communication skills, your skills to influence, your skills to be a team worker, conflict resolution, problem solving. All of these skills come into the forefront when you're in HR. And it gives you a chance to play to your strengths. If this is something that you are good at, then this profession is more likely for you. You can work in any industry. Look at my background. I was running HR at a real estate company for Jones Lang LaSalle, JLL. I was in HR at a technology company, Comdisco, and I ran HR for a healthcare company, for an insurance company. So there's a lot, it's agnostic to industry. You can be in any industry. In fact, now since I've started my business for 2 years, I've been working with higher ed, universities, not-for-profits. So it gives you a chance to go into any industry as long as you have good HR and business skills. And it's a very fast-paced environment. It moves very quickly. Your day goes by fast. It's exciting sometimes, but sometimes it can be very daunting as well. And we'll talk about that. And it's a growing profession. There are many jobs in HR today. In fact, if you look at, even in India, there are several jobs, and I'll show you some statistics in a bit, that have started to evolve as a result of the need of this particular profession. So what are some of the downsides, disadvantages? You can see that in HR, you can have a tremendous workload. You can be overloaded with work. It's a 24/7 job. There's never a dull moment, but it can be very hectic. The competition is severe. It's a very competitive field. And because there are lots of folks now who are entering this field. And so it's highly competitive. There's a significant amount of stress. If you, I'll give you an example. I was working at a client's, and I'm running their HR function for them. And I get a call. I walk in and I get a call that there was a shooting outside our office, one of our offices. And so, of course, they called me. And all of a sudden, I have 2 employees who are trapped in a building and there was a shooting outside. And so my job now is to not only calm those 2 employees down, but also literally, this was 2 weeks ago, literally I had to pull all the employees into a room and talk to them and make sure that their safety and their security was paramount to us. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of uncertainty in what you do and how you do it. And so it requires a ton of patience. You have to, this is one area that I'm not very good at, but it's something that you do need. you have to be extremely patient, and you have to be able to sort things out in a very calm, composed manner. As I said earlier, fast-paced environment can be a deficit as well as positive. Being in a fast-paced environment, some people like it. Some people feel really flustered. And so if you don't like the fast-paced environment, this may not be the career for you. And it's constantly changing. HR every day, if you think about the world of HR, things change dramatically from one to the other. Policies change, legislation changes. So there's a lot of change. Now, when I look at this list, to me, this is not at all daunting. I thrive on this. I love high workload. I love the competition. I don't mind the stress and uncertainty. And I know that low degree of recognition, when you're hiring and firing people, people don't recognize you. When you're doing layoffs, people don't say thank you. So I understand that you can do a lot of work and not get recognized, but that doesn't bother me. So it's how you are made up. If this is something that you enjoy, then you should really go after it. So there's a technology conference coming up next week, actually, and Lars Schmidt is one of the speakers. And I just read this because they've been talking about him as being a keynote. And he says there's never a better time to work in HR. And I believe that deeply. We have this once in a generation opportunity to fundamentally change how our function works and drive better outcomes for our business and employees. And I believe that. I believe that this is the best time for HR professionals ever. In the 40, 50 years since this HR function has grown, it is the best time for HR professionals. It is the most exciting times because there's so much opportunity. So let's look at India. HR professionals in India are among the top 3 most in demand. In India, according to HCM, HR was one of the top 3 jobs. The other 2 are medical professionals and sales and business development professionals. So it's the most highly demanded career or profession. Even in the US, it is listed as number 17 on the US News and World Report on their list of best business jobs. And it has been consistently listed as one of the top 100 best jobs, not just for this year, but even in previous years. In the past 5 years, it's been consistently considered to be a top job. By the way, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So let's talk about the skills that are necessary. This is my list of skills that you need to be successful. First of all, the number 1 skill is communication. You're going to be talking to employees, you're talking to leaders. It is really important that you have solid communication skills. And these grow over time. As you start your career into this field, you can start to develop these skills, hone these skills. Flexibility and open to change. As I mentioned to you, you have to be flexible. You have no clue what's going to happen every day, and you have to be prepared to switch gears. If something is happening today, and you come prepared for a project, that project may be pulled off from under your feet because something negative happened. So you have to be flexible and open to change. As I mentioned, you have to have patience, and you have to be very empathetic. You have to have strong business acumen. I worked in many fields. As I said, I was in the technology field, in real estate. My first 6 months in every job that I started, I spent 6 months with a full immersion into the business. You have to understand the industry that you're working in, because if you're going to hire and you're going to promote people and you're going to help leaders be successful, you have to understand the business that they're in. So that's really important as well. I can give you examples of how problem solving and analytical skills are critical. I use the example of Amazon. Amazon has had quite a ride. They have 1,000,004 employees, 1,000,004. And when the pandemic hit, you can imagine Amazon had to ramp up its recruiting efforts. They were hiring, they hired just between July and December of last year, they hired 350,000 people. I mean, that's huge. Now, they also were losing a lot of people. There's a great article in New York Times, and you can Google it, and it tells the Amazon story. And it's all about how HR had to deal with some of the challenges that Amazon faced. Not only do they have to recruit, but remember, they have to create technologies to recruit that quickly. They're going to hire 65,000 people between now and the end of the year, because everybody shops on Amazon. If you're in the US, I do all of my shopping, my towels, my anything, a television, books, you name it, I'm always on Amazon. And so you can imagine how this organization grew from nothing to becoming the largest employer in the world. And so it's all about how HR delivers for them. You know, how do they hire the warehouse people? They have huge turnover. Why did they hire 350,000 people? Because they lose people. They lose their turnover is 150% in the warehouse. So their HR people have to be real experts, and they hire without human intervention or interaction. They use computers mostly. They use artificial intelligence, but it's all about HR being able to deliver that fast. Amazon could never have grown to the level it did if it did not have the HR support, the problem solving, the analytical skills. It's really critical. So if you want to succeed in HR, those are skills that you absolutely have to have. And then teamwork and collaboration. You know, in HR, you've got to be working with other people. You cannot be an island. You cannot work in isolation. So collaboration is really important. And the last thing I'll tell you is leadership and learning ability is crucial. You have to, no matter whether you're leading people or not, you have to be a strong leader, and you have to have the ability to learn constantly. You have to be a lifelong learner. So I'm going to stop there for a minute. Any questions at all? Let's see, there are a couple. If not, I'm going to keep going. Okay. So let me talk about two, who I call, Let me talk about two real experts in this field. One of them is Dave Ulrich, who is a professor in Michigan. So if you really are interested in this field, I encourage you to look up two of these experts in the field. And I know both of them really well. Dave Ulrich has written several books, and his books are used by every CHRO I know of. And so it's really important that if you are considering that, you look up Dave Ulrich. The second guru in HR is Josh Bersin. Actually, I am on the faculty of the Josh Bersin Academy. It's the largest network of human professionals in the world. And they are very current. So if you want to know what's happening in the HR field today, I would recommend that you look up both Josh Bersin and Dave Ulrich. Here's a book that he wrote about competencies. And he talks about 6 competencies that are needed for the future of HR. In fact, his book is called Outside in HR. And he says that you have to, for HR people to be successful, you have to understand what's going on in the business world. What are some of the trends that are happening outside that you can then bring into the inside? You know, take a look at diversity and inclusion. You know, that became a big deal. After you all heard about George Floyd, it became a global issue and a global challenge. And diversity was one of the hottest topics in the boardrooms, in the leadership rooms, in corporations. And so what Ulrich is saying is you have to be sensitive to what's going on outside so you can create the internal actions and be much more savvy about those. And then the second thing he says is HR people have to focus both on business results as well as human improvement. I will tell you, the best HR people are those who have business savvy, are business savvy and have a strong business acumen, which is why getting an MBA to me, is probably the best approach for HR folks. I could have gotten a master's in HR, but I chose MBA because it was important for me to understand the principles of business, marketing, finance, some of those things that are important for HR people to understand. It gives you a great foundation by getting an MBA. And also, HR people should be looking at both individual ability as well as organization capabilities. So they have to have a micro and a macro approach. They have to figure out how to make individuals successful. What are the skills? What do you train people for? But they also have to look at the organizational capabilities. How do I design the organization? What are some of the policies for the organization, for the enterprise? And then the next one he says is HR is not about activities. It's not about programs. When the pandemic hit, HR needs to look at the well-being of the employee, not just doing a little, event or a little celebration. It's much more about sustainable solutions, finding ways to make systemic change. And then the next one he talks about is past and future. HR has been growing, so let's not throw the old HR legacies out. Those are very good. When in those days, we worked very hard to build people relationships. People relationships are important. As computers have taken over, you don't want to forget that. You want to shape the future, but you don't want to forget some of the old HR ways of dealing with situations. In this day and age, when you have an employee issue, an employee is not happy with their boss, a computer isn't going to solve that problem. You still need people skills. You still need the old ways of handling employee relations issues, but you can shape these for the future. You can build a future that complements both the human aspect as well as the technical aspect. And then the last thing, some reason I got muted. HR has to be both administrative as well as strategic. What does that mean? It means that some of the tasks that they do are very administrative in nature, and you have to be able to do them well. You have to be very organized, and you have to be able to recruit. I mean, to me, that's an administrative task. At the same time, you have to be do some long-term planning as well. Some of the things that you will do in HR deals with long-term planning, and you have to be good at both. So this is a model. Hold on. Yeah. This is the Dave Aldrich model that has sustained over time. He put this out, 10, 15 years ago, and it's still there. This develops the roles of HR. So you can see HR is a strategic business partner. They're change agents, they're admin experts, but they are also employee champions. So you have to be playing in each and every one of these spaces. You have to be able to deal with strategic issues as well as employee issues. Now, here are some jobs. These are traditional HR jobs. These are jobs that continue to remain in place. And I'm going to show you some future jobs as they've evolved. So the HR business partner, you've probably heard, if you've done any research in HR, this is a generalist position. So if you're working for a small company, you would be doing everything in HR for that company if you're an HR partner or an HR manager. This is a general position which has broad level of responsibility. You're probably handling all the compensation work, all the training, all the hiring and firing, everything that's related to that. That's an HR business partner role. Now, there are some technical roles, and these are subject matter experts in HR. And you can actually anchor your HR career into any one of these. And so when I was growing up in HR, I held a lot of these jobs. If you recall, I started as a generalist when I worked for that small insurance company in Seattle. But when I worked for a very large company, I was doing a lot more of the compartmental work. So I was a recruiter. for 2 years. And all I did was hire employees. And that's the talent acquisition consultant recruiter job. That person has to hire, onboard, they have to figure out. And in today's world, the sourcing techniques are very different. You don't run ads in the paper, you use LinkedIn profiles. You need to understand how to find the right talent. And so the recruiting job is really a critical role. Employee relations consultant. I held that job as well. This is the job that handles all the sticky, not such great kinds of issues, labor relations, legal issues. When employees in the US, I don't know about India, but in the US, it's a very litigious country. And so if someone is not satisfied, they have a recourse to go to court, and they can sue their manager or they can sue their company. And so employee relations consultants have to be really strong in understanding the legalities, understanding the local laws. And that's a special field that you can grow in. If you're interested in that, you learn about employment law, you learn about law in business school. I did business law, but there's an entire specialty around employment law that is important in HR. And then compensation and benefits, again, a very technical field, a very strategic field. You can develop all sorts of compensation strategies for salespeople, for, even for technology people, business folks. So compensation and benefits have to be very alert in what are some of the trends, benchmark these jobs against certain things. So again, it's a very highly sophisticated and technical field that is evolving. And then the next set of jobs is around performance, learning, and talent specialists. These are jobs where you're actually helping coach employees, coach leaders, handle their performance issues. But this is where HR becomes really valuable. I reported directly to 11 CEOs. 20 to 30% of my job was really in this field. This is where I worked the most. I built succession planning. So if something happens to my boss, who's the next in command? You have to build the infrastructure for the organization, the HR pipeline or the HR infrastructure to make sure that these leaders are equipped to do their jobs. And then the last thing is very, very technical. It's a specialty. HR systems are huge. Think about it. When you have 1 million employees, or even if you have 10,000 employees, you cannot work off of an Excel spreadsheet. You need mega systems. You need applicant tracking systems. You need PeopleSoft systems that allow you to maintain dashboards that look at trends, that look at what's going on in the organization. So this is a really interesting area for those who want a combination of soft skills and hard skills. I find that in my job as head of HR, this is a very critical role because I will not make decisions without getting data. And data is really important to me. And most CHROs in today's world are looking at smart people who can dissect the data, who can analyze the data and tell you what the root cause is for a problem. So it's really important that you have both the understanding of how HR works, but also you can get deep into the data. I mean, if you think about the algorithms that companies are building just to do hiring, when you're hiring at such large levels, you need to have very sophisticated systems. You need very strong data analysts. So there are lots and lots of opportunities within the field. I haven't listed a lot more here. As I mentioned to you, diversity, equity and inclusion is a big profession. There are 3,500 diversity jobs open, chief diversity officer jobs open in the US today. And it is a huge, it's a huge opportunity for people who want to go down that path. And so the future jobs, I'm going to switch. I also didn't talk about organization design positions. I didn't talk about employee experience. There are a multitude of jobs that play in the HR field that would interest anyone who's in the MBA program, if you should be so inclined. These are the jobs of the future. Research tells you that the evolution continues. HR isn't going to be static. it continues to change as the demands on the HR folks continues to grow. You can see that it's starting to get much more technical, much more sophisticated. So the first job up here is HR data scientist. They're starting to look at HR technology officers because data is so important in this day and age. So if anything, you should be really, if you have a good sense, if you're both right brain and left brain, this is a perfect role for you because it allows you to not just look at the data, build the platforms, but figure out what can you do? How can you influence people's lives with it? I mentioned employee experience. This is becoming, again, this is in the lingo of every leader in large corporations. Why is it important? Because the war for talent is going to continue to wage. We talk about how the market is shifting. There will be more jobs than there are people. And so companies are really interested in making sure that the employees have the best experience in their company. Otherwise, they're going to leave. They invest so much. When you find a job, think about how much you have to go through the interviewing process, the onboarding process, the training process, getting acculturated, getting acclimated into a company. It takes a lot of time. And then 6 months or 12 months, if that person leaves, it's a huge cost to the organization. And so there are experienced specialists, and their job is to understand what is exciting to an employee. And every employee works differently. So what is good for one employee may not be good for the other. What experience is good for one may not be good for the other. So those jobs are starting to grow. And then talent acquisition is, again, morphing into something totally different. This is the one where HR specialists are looking to find different ways to find people. LinkedIn is one, Indeed. I mean, you've heard of so many engines that are out there, but that's not enough in the new world. Companies are starting to get very creative and coming up with all sorts of ideas. So that's another job that's evolving. And then candidate experience. As I said, because of the war for talent, companies are really careful in not turning off people. If the person is not selected today, they may be ready for tomorrow. So how can I keep that person warm? How can I make sure that that applicant who didn't get the job today is always going to be interested and may come back tomorrow? And then, as I said, performance coach. I spent a lot of my time being a performance coach to leaders, to employees, whether it's management staff or non-management staff. My goal is to make every employee in the company successful so that they can produce the best for the company, that their productivity levels are high. That is what HR has to do. They have to make sure that the employees are successful and the company is successful. And then organizational psychologists. This is a totally new field. While technically it's not an HR job, there are a lot of companies that are looking at psychology. They do psychometric testing to see whether the employee who's working for them is a good fit. This is becoming a huge new field for HR. Now, compensation. Let's talk about compensation. So what do if you put in time and effort, what is it paid? This is what I found out. Now, in the US, of course, the salaries are very different. But in India, according to pay scale, the average salary for an entry-level HR manager position who has less than 1 year experience, and this is what I'm talking about. If you can get an internship, if you're serious about HR and you get an internship or even start someplace, within a year, you can expect to make 3,60,000. Now, I don't know how good that is for you, but to me, it sounds like, in my day, when I first started as a lecturer, believe it or not, my salary was 650 rupees. And with 650 rupees, I was able to, in the first month, buy gifts for my entire family, take them all out to dinner, and still have a lot savings. So imagine where we've come, 3.6 lakhs to me sounds like a lot of money. But you can see the range is huge. Salaries range from anywhere from 4 lakhs to 20. In fact, when I was at JLL, I had the opportunity to work in India. I spent quite a bit of time in India because we merged with an Indian organization and we hired about 5,000 employees. And I was able to visit, Accenture and Bangalore. So I have a good sense that salaries have escalated. If you want to be a leader, you're talking about crores, not lakhs. And HR people are starting to make a lot of money. And if you read, I'm sure you can Google it and see that salaries have started to take on a whole different meaning in the HR world. So this is just a sampling as of last year. And I'm going to stop here. Any questions so far? Come on.
So if anyone have any question,
Yeah, there are some questions in the chat.
Okay, let me take a look at that. So how do you decide that a person is a best fit when hiring someone? So when you're in HR, you have to build, for every job that's out there, HR people have to define the skills and competencies. That's what we do. So we would define the optimal skills and competencies for a given job. And then HR folks are trained to do technical interviews, to do behavioral interviews, and to see how that person fits into the organizational culture. So it's important for HR people to be really savvy about understanding how employees will behave. So they ask behavioral questions. They ask employees, you've gone through the interviewing process. They will ask you questions that will give them a sense of how you work. And so it's really, that's how HR people know. Now, they're never always accurate, but there is a skill to interviewing. There's a skill to finding out whether that person is the right person or not. And so that is one of the reasons why we are offering these courses on interviewing, offering courses on how to develop your resume, how to look good, so that you can, sometimes you don't say things as well as your resume may not be the best reflection of you, or your interview may not be the best reflection of you, which is why we ask you to think about practicing and figuring this out so that the person who's interviewing you will get a good idea of how you work. And that's how they manage to recruit. How can someone be an organizational psychologist not being from a psychology background? I mean, is it open for all? No, what I was saying is you cannot be a psychologist. You cannot be a psychologist without having a degree in psychology. A lot of HR people these days have an undergraduate degree in psychology. I have hired a number of HR people from that field myself, only because when you're educated in the field of psychology, you are trained to handle employee issues much better. So that's becoming a much more of a common phenomenon where companies are looking for people with that sort of a background. I mean, if you're not trained, you cannot be dealing with those kinds of issues. But in some respects, HR people tend to be psychologists in some respects, the good HR people. They have a sixth sense. They kind of know by talking to you what you are good at and not good at, because they've done it over years. I've probably interviewed thousands and thousands of people over the 30 years that I've been doing this. And so I have a sixth sense that tells me, and I know how to probe. And so that's kind of what they're talking about, is they need psychologists to understand how people will think in this new day and age. In my time, I go back in the 80s, you guys weren't even born. People used to work and retire from the same company. They had 40-year careers. Not anymore. Employees now who come from big schools, they want to be a CEO in 5 years. That 40-year career is gone. And they move because they think the next job is better. The grass is greener on the other side. And so they move all the time. And that is why companies are trying so hard to try to keep the employees that they've invested in. And so that's the whole idea of the psychologist understanding what keeps the employee happy. How can I make sure that I have the best person in my job? During the pandemic, how were you able to bring the positive environment? Very challenging. I'll tell you a story. So I used to run these sessions. I'm on the faculty of the Josh Person Academy. And every Friday for the last 2 years, I've been doing these roundtable discussions with heads of HR and HR professionals from around the world. And one of the sessions was with the hotel business. And actually the head of HR, C.V. Murthy, is also on the faculty. He was the head of HR of Taj Hotels. And he and I ran a session together. And it was very fascinating for me. He was the head of HR of Taj Hotels, and I've been doing HR, in the US. And we both on Google, we ran a session of about 15, or I think there were 15 or 16 heads of HR of hotels like Marriott and Hyatt all around the world. So these were hotels all around the world, Disney hotels. And one of the stories I'll tell you during the pandemic that was very touching to me is how difficult it was for folks in India to manage in an environment where they had to work from home. They had parents in the same house. They probably were confined to a room. They had children who couldn't go to school, who were running around, and yet they had to work in that sort of an environment. And these were real stories we heard from the people. And so what is the positive out of this? The positive out of this is what companies have done is they have tried to help employees manage their mental and well-being. So for instance, what Taj Hotels did, they actually opened up their rooms because people were not staying in the hotels. They opened up the rooms and created office space so that employees could work out of their hotel rooms. And so each company curated their own little programs that made employees feel better during the pandemic. And they were, different situations. In the US, it was completely different. In the US, there were lots of people who lived by themselves. And when you're living by yourself, you want to get out. You want to be in an office environment. And yet you were at home by yourself on a screen, day in and day out, hour after hour. And so how did we create positive? We tried very hard to give them a break, do some celebrations online, create parties online. And companies have to start thinking about, that's what HR did. I mean, all of us, my team and I, we tried very hard to make sure that people were getting the right tools. Did they have the printer? Did they have the right equipment? Did they have the right bandwidth? I mean, we also gave them, Fitbits, just so they could be exercising during the time. So every company and every group is very different. And that is incumbent on HR to deliver the best experience for the employees.
And Dr. Razi,
Yes.
I was just wondering if you are done with your presentation, you can just stop sharing and then we can have a conversation.
Well, I was going to say, I have a few slides on leadership, but I can skip those if people are most interested in this. It's your call. I have about 10 or 15 minutes.
It's up to you. I guess if the questions are coming, we can just take them now and then.
Okay, we can do that. Let me stop sharing. Yeah. So let's take a look at some of the other questions. How can someone, let's see, due to work from home, will there not be a lack of HR sectors in companies and organizations? Actually, it's to the contrary. Even though there are people working from home, work has not stopped. Organizations continue to build new policies. It requires HR to be thinking differently, but it isn't that there's less work. It's different work for HR people. And that's what you've got to think about is this something that you would find exciting? I mean, it's very different from creating apps. It's very different from generating marketing and brand solutions. That's very different from HR. It's the human resources aspect.
So guys, you can unmute yourselves and ask a question. Again, take this opportunity to, come on the screen, talk with, this is also a sign of leadership, right? So any questions that you have, please, unmute yourselves and ask.
Remember, I told you, you need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to be able to ask questions freely.
Yeah, hi, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
Ashwini.
So, ma'am, at a time when all the organizations are moving towards incorporating technology in their workplace, how important is it for an HR candidate to gain skills in the technical area of HR, like getting comfortable with the softwares in the market? How important is that?
I think it's extremely important. As I was sharing with you, the new jobs that are coming up, they're all bound by technology. The technology solutions will make a big difference. In this day and age, everything that we do, whether it's performance management systems or whether it's applicant tracking systems is what it's all about. And so technology is front and center, data is front and center, big data is front and center. So HR people have to be really experts in that field. They have to understand. Now, if you're working for a technical company, it's a different aspect of technology. You have to know what's required in that job so you can hire the best people. But if you are working in HR, you still have to have large technical platforms. If it's a small company, they have bolt-ons. Most technology solutions come in varying sizes. I don't have to tell you that. So it's important for you to understand the customized approach to a technical solution. What is important? What sort of technical solutions apply for your company? So I'm working with a company that has 50 employees. I'm their consultant. And so I have to advise them on what sort of technology solutions they need. I'm also working with a university that has 30,000 employees, and their technical solutions are very different. I'm talking about HR technologies, okay? So in order to really manage in the HR environment, you have to understand what HR technologies are existing out there. And it's scary to me because there are hundreds of solutions. Everyone is trying to come to me saying, mine is the best. Well, you have to know which solution is going to work for you. So if you're not technically smart, you could make the wrong decision for your organization. So it's really important that either you have the skill or you have someone you rely on and trust who can bring that skill to bear. So I'm not a technology geek. I mean, I know enough. I'm a data geek. So I taught math for 25 years. I taught calculus. I'm very strong in mathematics, and I'm very strong in data and analytics. So I understand the use of data, and that's important to me. But I don't understand the technologies. I don't understand blockchain. I don't understand how Scrum Masters work. But I know the skills that are needed for those jobs. I know what to look for when I'm hiring a Scrum Master, because that's important. I don't have to be one, but I need to know one. So in the HR world, that's the variety that is really at play. What you have to do, you have to know everything about marketing. This is what's interesting to me. I have to know, I'm working with a marketing, there's a company in New York. Because I run a business now, I get a chance to work with multiple industries. So right now I'm working with a marketing manager, and his biggest thing is, how do I develop the brand for this? How do I develop websites? How do I develop marketing communications? I mean, and I'm helping him reorganize his jobs. I'm helping him create. I just last night wrote a job description for a head of sales and marketing. For me to write a job description, I need to know enough about that field. And so the interesting thing is you're at the epicenter of the business. Being an MBA student, you're playing in multiple fields. That's how HR is. HR has to play in multiple fields. So depending on which industry you're in, you need to know the depths of that industry. Now, when I was working for real estate, all I had to do was understand real estate. So I knew how brokers sold homes and sold buildings. I knew how that worked. And it was just one singular industry. But as a consultant, I have to know all the industries. So that's what I would encourage you. If you are truly interested in HR, you have to have a good blend of the right brain and the left brain skills. That's important because they have to mesh together and they have to come together in this field. It's a very exciting field. I will tell you, I think 3.5 lakhs is not that big a deal in this day and age, but that number is going to grow. I can guarantee you it's going to grow in a phenomenal way because HR people are very hard to find. One of my clients, She's been looking for, the CEO has been looking for a head of HR now for a long time and can't find any. I mean, this is a very high in demand. You saw that it's one of 3 top jobs in India. So it's a great profession to break into. And it really, it is an amalgamation of all of these skills that you can use, which you're learning in the MBA program. So it gives you a chance to grow that. But as I said, it's not for everyone. You know, you have to have thick skin. You have to be able to deal with the toughest situations, because the first person they're going to call is you. You know, one of our vendors, I'll tell you another story. One of my windows, I was working at a CNA Insurance, and the window, literally the window right next to me, I was on the 41st floor. It crashed and fell on a woman who was walking on the street, and it sliced her. And so what happened, my life changed completely. I mean, for 3 days, I had police in my office. I had the firemen who were there. It was just a whole different world for me, because I was the only HR, the only leader on that floor. And so I was giving testimonies. So anything can happen because you are in HR, anything good or anything bad, you will be called, and you have to be ready. You have to be prepared to deal with all of the situations that come to you. So, you know, I can tell you some really great stories. I gave you a really bad one, but there's some really great stories where you feel at the top of the world, because, you know, when I created Blue University at the last company I worked at, and I was the dean of the Leadership Academy. And we built classrooms, we built curriculum. And I remember cutting the ribbon for that university. It was in my building. The building is 65 stories high. And this was on the 45th floor. We built the university. We had walls, we had quotes. And I remember standing next to the CEO, and the media was there, and we were doing the ribbon cutting. And it was such a beautiful moment, because I ran HR and it was my university, and I could teach people how to be successful. So there are the highs and the lows. There are all kinds of things in HR that play out differently. Anyway, I'll stop there. Any other questions?
May I ask?
Yes.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask, like, what do you see in a cold email which you received, and what's the hack to get past in a cold email?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
समझ में नहीं आया फैजान क्या बोलना चाह रहे हैं.
Sir, he want to ask how to crack start a conversation, break the ice with the HR via cold email. You want to ask that?
Oh, like a cold calling, just
yeah.
If you want to.
Yes.
So you have no experience. How do you make that first call? Is that kind of the question? How do you break into this career? Well, it is tough. I will tell you, when you have no experience in HR, the fact that you have an MBA gives you an edge. Okay, let's start there. You're getting an MBA right now. And so getting an MBA gives you a huge edge. It does in the US, and I'm sure even in India, it is probably important. You cannot just say, I want to be in HR without having had some sort of underlying experience. Either you take courses, or you intern, or you start at the very bottom. You find out if there is a company that's looking. For me, I started as a recruiter, as I said to you. I mean, I started as a generalist, but my first real HR hardcore job was to recruit. And there are many, many jobs that are open. So but you have to have the skills to be able to recruit. You have to learn how to do it. So I would tell you that if you know someone who is in this field, who can mentor you, that is a great approach. You need to be able to speak the language. You need to be able to show that you have the requisite skills to be an HR expert, or even not an expert, to understand the nuances of HR. You don't have to be an expert. You have to understand what it takes to hire people, what it takes to deal with employees. So cold calling is tough. So it's not something you can do without having had the benefit of some connection.
Yeah, or I guess in their particular situation, starting with an internship might be a good way to sort of think about it. If internships are difficult, then you have to think maybe somewhere, some business that you know, or the university, wherever there is a possibility to do something similar, that might be one way to sort of, gain some experience in this matter.
Even in startups, I know that there are many startups, you may want to go help them handle some of the basic HR work. You can help them create systems. You can help them, if they're working with Excel spreadsheets right now, you can help them build a little platform for them, anything that you can do related to their people needs, that would be the best way to do it. If there's something that you really like, for instance, if you think it's marketing or finance, but you want to break into HR, use that skill to penetrate the HR world. Use the skill that is the best for you. Don't do stuff that's uncomfortable, because then you will hate it. And you want to be happy in life, right? You don't want to pick a career that's going to make you miserable. I mean, that would be no fun. You really want to pick a career that's going to make you feel good and that you've done something good for people as well. So I encourage you really to think seriously whether this is is this something that you will enjoy, and are you going to be good at it? By the way, there are many tests. I don't know about India, but I know there are many diagnostic tests that allow you to understand what career is good for you. I mean, I used to do this a long time ago, where you can actually take a little test and it'll tell you the top 3 or 4 jobs that you're best at. And so, of course, you yourself should be self-aware. You should know what your strengths are. You should know what your weaknesses are. If you don't like dealing with people, this is not a job for you. If you don't like communicating and making presentations, this is not a job for you. You have to be able to make presentations. You're going to be constantly asked to speak. And so if you're not comfortable with it, don't go down this path. So now there are certain jobs in HR that are behind the monitor jobs, where you sit in front of a computer and you can create a lot of things. Certainly you can do that. And certainly you will add value. So you've got to really examine, as I said, read. There's a lot of literature out there on HR jobs. If you're really interested, read about that and then decide, and the minute you read, you're going to know, and you'll ask all the right questions. You'll become intelligent just by understanding what the profession is. So when you talk about cold calling, the next time you talk to someone, you will know the language. You will know what to ask. So think if you're really serious about the HR profession, open up the learning avenues for yourself and find ways to understand what is it that an HR person does. And as I said to you, there's several roles. Find one that is yours, that you like to start in. Find one that you think you will be good at.
Other questions, you can also ask general questions, not necessarily related to HR. Dr. Razi has, many years of experience and interacted with thousands of people. So, anything that you want to ask is open game at this stage. So, leadership पे अगर पूछना है.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have time for another few slides, but if you have any questions, how long was this supposed to go, Dr. Ansari?
अब देखिए 12, I mean, it's 12:10 here, so I guess another 10-15 minutes at the most we can manage, probably. So
I'm happy
I
to
have
run.
another question, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm the part of the placement cell here at Jamia MBA. So as an HR, what are your views about how to best contact a company, like an established company, to visit our campus for campus recruitment drives? I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a relevant question, but I really need to know, what is the best way to actually contact the HRs from different companies, and how to motivate them to come hire MBA candidates from Jamia?
Yeah, you have to understand from my perspective, think about it. When I post a position on LinkedIn, I get hundreds of applications. I get, inundated with people calling me about, can I apply for this job? So it's virtually impossible for companies to manage the traffic. So you have to look at it from that angle. And so the best approach that works is if you know someone in the company, and that becomes your inroad, which is why when I talk about leadership, the best thing that you can do for yourself is build a network, to find people who are, and the way you build network is to socialize, get to know people. And once you know someone, they can help you. I'll tell you, I've never applied for a job. And, I've grown from being a recruiter to being a comp analyst to being, all kinds of jobs I've held. And ultimately, I was the CHRO for very large companies, for Fortune 100 companies. I've done this, 3 times in my life, careers that 8-9 years for each of these. And the reason I wasn't applying is because when they hear about you, they'll call you. Companies call you when they know how good you are, but you have to start somewhere. You have to start making a difference, and you have to really find people who will be your mentors. To me, I had very strong mentors. I had breakfast with both of the ladies last week. They're both Americans. They're very successful. One of them was the CEO, and I still go to her when I have a question. And so find people who will know you and get to know them. It's very difficult for HR people to pay attention to that many folks out there. So I can't tell you, you can try, LinkedIn works really well. Indeed works well. We use all sorts of technology applications that get us to the right sources. But if you know someone in the company, that's your best bet.
Yeah, so there was a related question, Dr. Razi, how to approach alumni for job help. So I guess, again, via LinkedIn is one possibility. If there are some formal channels that are available within your university, one possibility is call alumni for talks like this. And then you are able to sort of, interact with them. That would be another way of sort of, doing stuff.
Attending conferences, WebExes, there's a lot of free knowledge out there. I tend to be hesitant to suggest taking courses that cost a lot of money. But I think if you do plan to invest in some of that, I think you have to be very careful in what you select. But as I say to all of my students, and I say this to my leaders and my employees, the one thing you can do for yourself is get knowledgeable, understand what are some of the things that you need to learn. So we have a lot of mentors here. Anyone else? You can chime in on the call. I think Moeed, you're here. I don't know. Is anyone else there, Dr. Ansari? Basharat Saab is there.
Basharat Saab is there. Let's see. I don't know who else is here. Let me see. Moeed, are you there?
He was there originally.
No, I don't think he's here.
So if
I'm very much here, Dr. Nazneen.
Yeah. So if there are any other questions, if not, I think we can end it here. I'm happy to go through the leadership slides, but I don't know if it's something that you would want. What do you think, Dr. Ansari? It's late for them.
Okay, Dr. Razi, if you want to share the presentation, they can take it. Or if there are a couple of slides that you think could be.
Let me show a couple of slides. Let me share. Hold on. I'll do that. I'll go through it very quickly. And I think it'll be good for you to see these. Hold on, give me a second. Okay, so let me go through just a few slides on leadership. So let me talk about why is leadership important. By the way, first of all, when I mention leadership has nothing to do with seniority or one's position in the hierarchy of a company, okay? Some people talk about leadership as if they were the senior executives in an organization. That's not true. That's a misnomer. Leadership is not the same as management. Leadership is about helping ordinary people becoming extraordinary. It's making sure that you are developing those critical thinking skills, problem solving. It's not about titles. It's not about seniority. Anybody can be a leader if you are influential, if you use your power and your ability to do good. And that's leadership. And you can build your leadership skills. And why is it important? I'm going to talk about it. So there are two things I'd like to do. One is to give you a little bit of background. And there's a very simple model that I've created that I think will help you build your leadership muscle, that you can use. So why is it important to be a successful leader? Here are some reasons why leadership is so important, okay? Number one, it'll help you find a good job. When you're a leader, you stand out clearly. You differentiate yourself because you now have the skills that are different from your peers. It also facilitates your personal growth. It cultivates a learning mindset. If you're a leader, you're always learning. You'll be a better student. Leaders want to be successful. They want to win. And you will seek networking opportunities. We talked about this. It will help you find ways to cultivate friendships. A lot of people are introverts. It's not that easy for some, but leadership is all about finding friends, seeking advice, leveraging those relationships with people. That's leadership. Then, it's great for your confidence. I will tell you, if you work on some of the things that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to give you some simple tips. And if you work on these, you will find yourself becoming much more confident in your abilities. You will find yourself becoming a good communicator, that you will improve your verbal skills, your written skills, if you do the things that I mentioned. And of course, you'll be a much better student. You leave the university, people will remember leaders. These are the students who help others, who inspire others to greatness. So that's leadership. So don't mix leadership with I'm the top of the chain or an executive. That's not what we're talking about. Everybody can be a leader. And leaders are influenced by your experiences, okay? How does one become a leader? Cultural is the first one. It's the environment in which you grow. I grew up in a family that taught me to respect education, that taught me to respect religion, my faith, my elders. It was ilm and iman. Iman was as good for us. So culturally, I grew up with a huge influence and I didn't want to compromise. Even though I was in the US, I never compromised my principles. There were certain things people knew that I wasn't going to change. So you need to be, that's a leadership trait. Social experiences are important. Your friends help you. It depends on the circles you move in. If you're moving in the right circles, your family, your mentors, they're the ones that are going to shape who you are, create your persona. Academic experiences, your education, your professors, they all help build your leadership strength. And finally, your work, your workplace, your managers, they will help you become leaders in the future. So that's sort of the thing. Now, let me show you, I'm going to skip this. This slide is just illustrative. It's really it's much more theoretical. So if you're taking a course on leadership in the MBA program, they will teach you all of these different styles. They're tests, they're personality tests you can take to decide whether you're an autocratic leader or a transformational leader. So we're not going to talk about that. I'm going to show you a very simple model that will be successful. So this is a book that I wrote a few years ago. And I can send you, if you're interested, there's a 5-page summary that was published, and I'm happy to send that to you. And it'll remind you of some of the things that I'm going to talk about. There are some simple things, techniques that will help you become a strong leader. And so this is a book about leadership. And in the book, we made certain assumptions. We said in order to be a successful leader, you have to have these 5 quotients, or 6 quotients. IQ, which is your intelligence quotient. We called it the 6 facets of intelligence. And the first one is IQ. You've got to be smart. You can grow your intelligence, but you've got to be smart. The second is you have to have an EQ, which is your emotional quotient. And how do you deal with others? How do you empathize with others? That's the second quotient. The third quotient is business quotient. You have to be business smart. See, you have an edge because you're getting an MBA. So having a BQ is very successful. Is very essential for successful leaders. The fourth one is cultural leadership. The world has changed so dramatically. If you think about the new world, the globe has started to shrink. In my time, hardly anyone traveled as much as they do now. People are opening up the boundaries, and people travel all over the world. So you have to be culturally savvy. Even within India is a cauldron of cultures. You have so many cultures, you have different languages, you have different sorts of food and different heritages. So all of that is important in building your leadership skills. And then moral compass, you have to be ethical. That is one thing I stand very strong on. You have to be ethically good. In order to be a leader, you should be morally intact. And then the last one is you have to understand how the global environment works. You have a lot of multinationals in Hyderabad. Even if you go to Infosys or Cognizant or Deloitte, all of these are multinational companies, and they all work in a global setting. So that's sort of the ingredient. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these and tell you how you can improve your leadership skills in at least three of them. Let me talk three important ones. The first one is IQ. Okay, there's a misnomer that you are born smart and that's it. That you're wired. If you're not born smart, then you cannot be intelligent, that you have to have that. That is not true. IQ can be trained. Yes, there are many people who are wired to be intelligent. So there's what I call the fluid intelligence and a crystallized intelligence, okay? So there are certain things you do have. For instance, you're never going to be like Shakuntala Devi. I don't know if you remember Shakuntala Devi. She was like the mathematic computer. She could do all kinds of algorithms in her head. So that's different. What I'm talking about, and even if you think about Srinivasa Ramanujan, these were literally, they were born with a different kind of brain. They were geniuses in their minds. But there's so much research out there that tells you that intelligence can be acquired. You can move your IQ up a lot by doing some of these things. So if you want to have the intelligence that is needed for a leader, you need to work at it. So what can you do? Here are a few tricks that you can employ. The first one is, I encourage you to not just read your textbooks. You need to do independent studies. You need to attend conferences. You need to do projects. You need to study on your own. So that will help you build that leadership muscle, okay? You need to exercise, strengthening your heart. There's a lot of studies that are done saying that there's a close relationship between athletics and intelligence. You'd be surprised. People who are really active, and so I encourage, they are smarter. For some reason, now when you're walking, listen to that podcast. You should be doing all sorts of exercises to help you grow physically as well as intellectually. The third thing is memory activities. There's a lot of strength in doing puzzles, Sudoku, you do crossword puzzles. All of these are expanding those neurons in your brain. It's really important that you keep that active. And the one thing, if you get out of my entire presentation, is this one, reading. I'll tell you that has changed my life. I am who I am because I read constantly. I encourage you to read the newspaper. Number one, I've said this, you've heard me say this. If anything, you should be reading the newspaper. I take an hour every day to read the news. It's just what I do. It would seem to me that I haven't had dinner if I didn't read. So make that a habit. Read anything. Read fiction, read articles, whatever is of interest to you, because that's going to help you expand your leadership strength. And challenge yourself. They say that if you do new things, it triggers the dopamine in your brain, okay? If you do new things, exciting things that are not necessarily what you do every day, do something different. read something different, or go watch a different kind of movie. Do something that's different, and then learn languages. People who are smart are multilingual. They make it their business to learn a new language and get proficient in that language. The good thing about India, in America, 90% or even more are just speak only one language, and that's English. So when they listen to me, I speak 7 languages. I studied 4 years of French. They are shocked, because I speak Urdu and Hindi and Telugu. And so they really are amazed at how, because it makes you grow that IQ that I'm talking about. Learn a different language, learn to read, learn to speak, and then improve your own language. Write blogs. It's so easy in today's world to experience a writing exercise. Write something simple, write a journal, write to your friend. What has happened with email and text? You don't even write the words anymore. You say LOL, you say BFF. Well, write. You need to write in long languages or in long structured sentences. So learn how to read and write. That would be my advice to you. I'm going to talk about 2 more quotients and then we'll stop. The second quotient is emotional. The emotional quotient is, what is it? It says that you have the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and influence the emotions of others. So not only do you know how you're feeling, but you know how others are feeling and you can relate to them. Okay, there are psychologists that believe that life's success depends only 20% on IQ and 80% on EQ. So you can be the best marketing expert. You can be the best financial expert. You can be the best HR expert. But if you have low EQ, you will never climb that ladder. So this is really an important quotient for you to develop. And how do you do that? You need to start figuring out where your frailties are. What are some of the weak spots in your character or in your skills? So for instance, when someone is criticizing you, don't take it to heart. You need to learn from what happened. Why am I being criticized? Control your fears, control your anger, control your emotions. That's what EQ is about. Listen to people, listen to what they're saying. Don't listen to yourself, listen to others, because you will learn from them. And there's a way to maintain a positive attitude. If you are not positive, you will be a burden on others. No one wants to hear someone criticize all the time. It wears you out. You have your own problems. You don't want to hear someone else's. So be positive at all times and practice self-awareness. If you have a good friend, if you really believe that friendship is trusting, ask that friend to tell you what you're not doing well. That's how I learned. I knew some of the things that I wasn't doing well, and I became self-aware. And then you work at it. As I said, I am very impatient. I have no patience at all. And so I had to work at it. When you have children, I had to learn patience through my kids. And so it takes time to develop some of these skills, and it takes teamwork. It takes working with others. The last one I'm going to talk about is the social quotient. This is, you asked questions about how do I get into an organization? How can I cold call? Well, you wouldn't have to cold call if you have a very strong social quotient. If you really are building relationships along the way, you reaching out to alumni, people like to be asked. If there's a student who was 5 years ago who did something and you know that person, but you don't know him, but they did something, pick up the phone and call or send them an email and say, hey, I'm working on this project and I understand you did this and you were really good at it. People like that, and say, okay, can you help me? And most often, if you do that, people are more than happy to help you. They will be more than happy if you do it the right way. That's the cultural quotient that we talk about, the social quotient. And understand, and then, smile, make new friends, be friendly. Don't be a burden on people. So those are the 3 sets of leadership skills that I would encourage you to think about as you move through your journey. So I'm going to stop here. I don't know if we have time for questions because I've taken up the 90 minutes, but do you have any questions at all?
Professor Razi, you could stop sharing and then.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
And then I think we are, if there is any question anybody has, we can take it. Otherwise, we'll end this stuff.
Is there any scope of research in leadership? Oh yeah, there are so many books on leadership.
Why do you ask Kamran? Maybe let's try to find out. Is he doing
Let's talk about that. Kamran, show yourself.
Assalamu alaikum, ma'am.
Walaikum salam. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Actually, I am interested in leadership, ma'am. That's why I asked. Actually, I want to pursue leadership if career allows, like McNamara.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So that's why I asked.
Yeah, so there's a whole body of literature around leadership. I can send you, I can post, a few books. Again, literally there are thousands. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many books have been written, because it's one of those areas that is not, it's not like a puzzle that you can solve. Human beings are very complex. And so leading in a complex world is very challenging. So if you're looking for a particular, there's no one book that will teach you how to be a leader, but there are several books that you can read. I mean, Ed Porras is done a good book on leadership. I like his work. I can send you a couple of books that are simple and will help you, at least start to think about leading. I'll send you the 5 pages that I mentioned, which go into each of these different ingredients. So yeah, being a leader it's not a subject to be learned. It's to be practiced. You have to practice it. You have to lead by example. You have to lead by experience. You can't just say, I'm going to read a book and become smart and be a leader. It's like saying, I'm going to read a book and start driving. It doesn't work that way. You don't read a book to drive a car. You drive a car to learn to drive a car. So you lead, and that's how you learn to lead. And so it's important that those experiences that I was talking about are some things that you embrace and adopt. And so that's what I would suggest is more important to you, is reading, communicating, building your network. Those are the things, and helping others. To me, leadership is really part of how do I influence and help other people. That makes you a leader. The big leaders in this world, I mean, they're all, there are so many. I mean, it's hard. Mahatma Gandhi in those days, his leadership was, he was very powerful, that he combined, he didn't discriminate. He did not discriminate against anyone because of their religion or their color or their backgrounds. And, he didn't discriminate, even the backward classes, he did not discriminate. So there's traits of leadership that rise above, and you have to experience those.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
कोई और अगर क्वेश्चन है तो पूछ लीजिए. We'll end.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we are at the end of stuff. Afrin, you want to have the last word?
It was really amazing to listen to you, ma'am. There's so many things I really got to learn from the session for the future growth of mine, and I hope if each and everyone thought same. So you answered some of my really deep questions through others and through your life experience.